God is great. All right, Psalm 129. Let's call this one Zion. Understanding that not too long ago I preached a sermon called Zion, but let's look at it from a different perspective. This time using Zion to represent us at our best. In this psalm, it starts off in verses 1 and 2, where the psalmist talking about how he has been greatly afflicted from his youth, but he has not been completely overcome. Going on to verse 3, where he's going to talk about plowers who seem to have plowed long furrows in his back. However, my ad lib, he's going to seem to say in verse 4, but God is righteous. The verse literally talks about God's righteousness in cutting the cords of the wicked, or those who seem to have had control over the psalmist's fate, as verses 5 through 8 are going to seem to go on to talk about the wishes, or the psalmist's wishes, for those who hate Zion, thus our title. And the thing that it made me think about in this particular usage of the term Zion is not simply the term for the place of God or the city of God, but it is that term describing God's place or God's people in their dwelling place at their best. And I think the reason why that stood out to me this time is the way in which the psalmist is calling for vengeance on all who hate Zion. It's not simply, once again, God's preference or preferential treatment for any group of people just because of who they are, as much as it is the psalmist seeming to call for God's vengeance on those who hate God's people, even when they are at their best. Understanding that we live in a time that commonly recognizes the scourge of haters. However, not everybody who disagrees with us is a hater. And this psalmist seems to recognize, in not simply calling out God's vengeance on all who hate Israel, but on all who hate Zion, that we have a level of valid criticism that we simply need to endure in life. However, we have probably found a hater when we find those who are not simply interested in criticizing us when we do wrong, but are willing, if not eager, to criticize us even when we are at our best. And our best doesn't mean when we're simply doing well, making money, or in a period of prosperity, but when we are handling life, whether rich or poor, with a kind of character that should attract respect. Which reminded me of something I recently heard Shannon Sharpe describe in the way of advice that he got from his sister, who told him that the way that we speak and act can cause us to fall out of God's favor, as he was describing the way in which it seemed that God had brought him into a period of prosperity. He had family who had permission to tell him that the way he handled that prosperity had everything to do with how long he might be able to keep it. Thus, his sister's advice was not hatred. And likewise, we may be at our best when we can take sound counsel, not just from friends, family members, and close associates, but everyone through whom God would bring us genuine guidance and truth. Which is why we sometimes say, my prayer for me is my prayer for you. May God grant us the discernment to distinguish those who hate us, even when we're at our best, from those through whom he is simply telling us the truth.